Okay, how are you guys? So, another part of the backyard, and this is question number, let me look at the paper. Number 3, foreign and domestic successes of the Carter administration. And you may have noticed, because I know you guys read the textbook very closely because you love it. Why wouldn't you? Um, I skipped Ford. Now, the reason I skipped Ford mostly is because you missed 2 weeks of school. So I didn't want to add extra instruction. I know we got to cut somewhere. If you were to take this class in the summer, you'd get more about Ford. Ford's nice fellow. Part of the reason that he becomes president is because Nixon got impeached, and he was a guy the entire Senate would confirm. So people liked him. He does some noble stuff. We like him more a lot later than we did at the time because he does pardon Nixon, which makes him unpopular. Yeah, really unpopular at the time. And really pretty much ensures that he won't be elected president, which is why we're talking about Jimmy Carter, who gets elected in the 1976 election. I remember it very well. It was the bicentennial year, 200th anniversary of our country. And Carter, oh my goodness, what a nice fellow. The dude's like 102. Well, he's in his 90s. And he's still out building Habitat for Humanity houses. He's had cancers, like, yeah, whatever, cancer. I'm going to go build a house for people that need a house. So, one of the nicest people ever that will have, you'll see as president. His father was an unusually civil rights active kind of dude who owned a big peanut farm in Georgia. And if you look online, oh gosh, I forgot to put the link in there. Living Room Candidate shows a lot of old campaign commercials. I'll slide that in there for an upcoming week just so you can look at it. But all of his campaign commercials show him in jeans on a tractor at the peanut farm. So he'll just look like the average dude. Okay, so he's an average dude the way that Trump's an average dude, or the way that Bush was an average dude, or the way Obama was an average dude, the millionaire type of average dude. So the Carter family had a multi-million-dollar peanut farm in Georgia. And Jimmy Carter's goal in life was to be a nuclear physicist, sort of like you guys. That's why you're always working on that crazy physics thing. Let me move this just a second. Oh, there, that's better. Maybe, maybe not. Um, but he worked on the nuclear physics thing the way you guys work on physics a lot. He also went to the Naval Academy. He went to Annapolis, the way that you guys probably will as well, and um, and wanted to make a career of the Navy, but his father got ill. He needed to come run home and run the peanut farm. Once he got that thing going, it really was already going, but he had to take over. Sorry. But once he got there, he also decided to run for local political office. He eventually becomes governor of Georgia. He's going to run as an outsider in a period right after Vietnam and Watergate, where we're tired of the insiders. We're just pretty sure that all of Washington is corrupt. And in that way, I think it's similar to what you saw with the Trump run for president, where he wanted to drain the swamp. That's what it was, drain the swamp. So, but Carter is a Sunday school kind of dude, and super nice family guy, married to a woman that he didn't date while he was married to her. So good family man. People liked him. They had a cute kid. So we liked him. And we thought he would bring a lot of honesty and integrity to the White House, which he did, along with a lot of inflation and unemployment, which I'm not going to argue was his fault because, I don't really think a president necessarily controls those things because usually they're predetermined by some policies ahead of time, but he certainly does control how he reacts to those things. And as you're noticing now, how a president reacts to a crisis is an issue. And Jimmy Carter's crisis was economic, but also military. All right, so here's some details. Also, I know, you have the assignment, you have page numbers. I think I would look more from 1048 to 1052 You also have some good online sources that you could check. Um, and I think they're brief enough. I really like those bio sources, the timeline thing, because that'll help you maybe look at some events that you want to pick out. Also, I'm going to remind you, I don't expect you to talk about every single thing that happened in the Carter administration. So maybe pick 4 or 5 things that you think are most important, talk about them with some detail, but also tell me why you think they matter, especially if you have an opinion about why they matter long term. All right. Biggest issues when the presidency started were economic. Oh my goodness. We had very high inflation. Prices on average everyday stuff like gas and bread and food and that kind of stuff had doubled, tripled, quadrupled. So everybody was really hurting. And it's part of the reason that Ford doesn't get elected. So our thought is that Carter can go in and fix all this stuff because he's a farm dude and he's a state dude and he's not a corrupt dude and he's an outsider. One of the interesting things about being an outsider, and you've probably noticed this a little bit with Trump, although he's, I know, not an economic outsider, but definitely a political outsider, is it takes him a while to pick advisors that both they are comfortable with and understand how Washington works. That's a particular problem with the current president. I'm not trying to be rude. I know it's Williamson County. We love Republicans. But it was also a problem with Carter, who was Southern and a Democrat. So it's not, unique necessarily to a party or to a business, because I know Carter was a farmer, but he's a multi-million dollar peanut farmer. So he's not, the guy growing broccoli down the street. He's, a fairly established kind of dude. And also had that background in the Navy. So he had some basic understanding of how stuff worked. Okay, back to economics. Sorry. The issue, oil prices had gone very high, and we did not produce very much oil. And there was a lot of conflict in the Middle East, which was part of the reason we talked a little bit about the beginnings of shuttle diplomacy last time. And the biggest conflicts were between those two nations, Egypt and Israel. They had declared war on each other in the 60s, then again in 72, I think it was. So part of why Nixon had sent Kissinger to talk to them was to get them to stop fighting. And then Carter is able to build on that diplomatic success and arrange something called the Camp David Accords, which the participants will win a Nobel Peace Prize for, and somebody will get assassinated over. It was Anwar Sadat from Egypt, and he's the one who gets assassinated, and Menachem Begin, who is from Israel. But they signed a historic peace accord, and those two nations really have not fought since. Now, one thing that happens, and it happens during the Carter administration, is while Egypt becomes much more diplomatic, Iran becomes a whole different kind of place. And during this time period, the Shah of Iran, the guy that we put in power in the 50s, and was not a nice fellow. I mean, he had you put in jail if you disagreed with him. He gets cancer and he's dying. So they want to overthrow him because he's weak at that point, and they want to kill him. So he gets in touch with people in the United States and says, hey, I don't want to die this way. Can I come to the United States? And you can say it's for humanitarian reasons, so I can get cancer treatment. So we let him come, and then they say, hey, send him back so we can kill him. And we go like, hey, that would be rude. And they go like, okay, fine. And they take over the US embassy and a bunch of hostages, which they keep for a very long time. And Carter is not very successful at negotiating their release until after the election, when Reagan gets elected. And then the day that they're released is the day that Ronald Reagan takes office, that he's inaugurated. It's supposed to be like the final insult to Carter. So Carter's administration does arrange the release of the hostages, but it doesn't happen until Carter's reelection bid is unsuccessful. And, again, I think we've mentioned this before. I know we talk a lot about how sometimes maybe Russia or China or Iran or somebody interferes in our election process. That is not a new thing, and we do that to other countries as well. Okay, as far as foreign policy goes, Carter's emphasis, sometimes it was détente, like with Nixon, or you may remember in the progressive era we had big stick diplomacy or dollar diplomacy or moral diplomacy. Carter's version of diplomacy is kind of similar to Woodrow Wilson's. His is a human rights-based diplomacy, and you see this pretty strongly in some instances, like in Argentina, where we cut off funding to Argentina because they have a brutal dictatorship. And he does institute the Camp David Accords and the Panama Canal Treaty, where we give the canal back to Panama because maybe we overthrew their government to build it. That was, I know it passed the Senate, and I know how that works percentage wise. You got to have 2/3, oh, sorry, bird, 2/3 of the Senate to approve a treaty. However, the American public was not super excited about the Panama Canal Treaty because we thought the evil, godless communists would take over the canal. Now, we didn't give it back right away. We gave it back, it's either the last day of 1999, where Prince would want you to party, or the first day of 2000, another bird, but by then, the evil, godless communists were really no longer an issue. But we didn't know that in the 1970s. We were still worried about them. Okay, so Camp David Accords, Panama Canal Treaty, cutting off Argentina from money. Good aspects of Carter's human rights-based diplomacy. Bad aspects, he wasn't consistent. And I don't know how you could be consistent with this because, it's just, yeah. But I'm not trying to give him the free pass. That's up to you. You can, you don't have to. Another bird. But the nations he kind of let get by with human rights violations would be Guatemala, the Philippines, South Korea, Iran. Although he did try to do some stuff in Iran, it just really didn't work well. The Soviet Union when they took over Afghanistan, and China. Okay, now the big mistakes, we've already talked about the Iran issue. So when the Iranians take over the embassy and hold the hostages, he's not able to successfully negotiate their release. Also, he has the military plan, a rescue mission, which fails very badly. They have helicopters take off, I think it's from Saudi Arabia, and the helicopters crash into each other, and everybody on the rescue mission dies. So that's a tragedy in itself. And then for him, it's a political issue because it looks like he is unable to rescue some hostages from some puny third rate country that we thought Iran was at the time. Also, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan, which, by the way, is never successful historically. So it's like if you're ever a ruler and you want to invade Russia in the winter, you've noticed maybe from your world history class that's a bad plan. Hey, there's a robin right over there. Um, Also, if you want to invade Afghanistan at any point, that also doesn't work out because yeah, it's a nation state kind of thing. It's tribal. It does, yeah, it's just not going to work. Just not going to work. So if you're ever in charge of stuff, do not invade Russia in the winter and just leave Afghanistan alone. These are important lessons from history. Carter, who's generally a pretty smart guy, remember, nuclear physicist. Um, yeah, he didn't do well there. So to protest that the Soviets had invaded Afghanistan, we boycott the Moscow Olympics. That makes Carter really unpopular because in the Cold War era, dang, we love the Olympics because it's a really good chance for us to show our superiority to the evil, godless, cheating, steroid abusing communist. You know what I'm saying. All right. So Carter's foreign policy problems are Afghanistan and Iran. He also chose Zbigniew Brzezinski as his national security advisor, who was very anti-Soviet Union because he's Polish, and you know what happened to Poland. Between Russia and the Soviet Union, or excuse me, Russia and Germany during World War II. So he's not going to be a fan of Russia, and I don't know. It depends on how you look at it. And your book doesn't talk about this much, but lots of people who write about this era think he kind of sabotaged the SALT II treaty, which we eventually just withdraw from because honestly, it's going to be useless. And Brzezinski kind of works against it. His daughter is a news anchor for CNN. Her name's Mika something. She's really blonde. That's all I remember about her. Okay, and I'm sure Trump doesn't like her because I don't know. Does he like anybody right now though? As far as the media, maybe. Yeah. Okay, we won't talk about that till later. Sorry. All right. So Carter, foreign policy stuff, issues with Iran and Afghanistan caused him problems, but um, he also issues something called the Carter Doctrine, which renounces the idea of détente, which kind of goes along with that Brzezinski, let's be tough sort of thing, and re escalates not just the nuclear war with, or not nuclear war, but nuclear tensions with the Soviet Union, but also with this Carter Doctrine says that we will employ the use of force to keep the Persian Gulf open. Now, Carter's issue again is that oil crisis. During the Carter administration, we had gas rationing, and you could only buy gas a certain couple of days a week. And if you didn't get in line on time, you might not get it before they ran out. You kind of probably understand this with the way grocery stores were a couple weeks ago, although I think they're better now, but I'm trying to avoid them because crowds and stuff, they're not my thing. All right, so the last thing, I know I need to talk about something else. Oh, the election. So Carter's going to run for re-election. He's going to say, like, I'm Carter, I'm a nice guy, I'm doing my best. But he also gives a speech called the National Malaise Speech, where he essentially tells the American people, if you weren't so lazy and disengaged and self-absorbed, then we wouldn't have a lot of these problems if you were more astute politically. So really the problems we have right now are your fault. If you're ever running for election, that may not be the best strategy for your campaign. So Carter's issues, he's got they start something in that era called the misery index, which is a combination of inflation, interest rates, and unemployment, all of which are terrible during this time period. So the economy is terrible. Our foreign policy makes us look weak, and we boycott the Olympics. So, other than that, things go really well for Carter. Carter's a super nice guy with a terribly ineffective presidency, which really dooms him to not getting reelected. I don't know if doom is the right word, but the guy that runs against him is a fairly charismatic guy, super popular dude, who is the subject of the last question of this week, Ronald Reagan. And I'll talk about him in a different setting that's not my backyard, okay? All right, it is still hot out here and there's still a lot of bugs. I hope you're having a good day. Take care of yourself. Sorry this went a little long, but Carter, he's a good dude. Bye.